Hello, my dear friends. Today we're going to create an atmospheric landscape in these beautiful, soft pastel tones. The colour palette is a bit greyish, and I would say the painting itself is not that complicated when it comes to working with colours and watercolour techniques. The main challenge, however, might be in the perspective construction. But don't worry, we already know the basic rules of perspective, at least linear perspective, right? And as I've mentioned in my previous lessons, we'll use that knowledge here. So, let's start with the horizon line. Normally, I don't place the horizon exactly in the middle of the page, but in this landscape, I've placed it almost at the centre. It's just a bit lower than the middle, actually. Usually, I don't use a ruler, but when it comes to linear perspective, it makes things easier. Now, let me mark the vanishing point for you. I'll find it later in more detail, but for now, I'll just roughly define it. First, I'm going to draw a rectangle to represent the main shape of the house. The house will be positioned with a smaller part below the horizon and the larger part above it. The proportions will be something like this, but I might adjust it later. I might lift it a bit higher. Now, I'll roughly define where the terrace goes. The next step is to locate the vanishing point. I could find it by myself, but it's easier to check the reference photo and base the angle of the terrace on that. I'll draw the lines and make sure they're going toward the vanishing point. All horizontal lines will meet at that point, while the lines that face the viewer, like the roof lines, will stay parallel. Right now I feel that the vanishing point is a little sharp, so I'm going to slightly reduce the angle. I'll move it just a little. This is the beauty of working with watercolour. We can always adjust things as we go. The vanishing point is where the viewer's eye would be. Now I'll mark where the edge of the house should be in relation to the columns. I see the column is a little bit closer to the edge, so I'll adjust the positioning here. It's important to keep the distance clear because we need to see the space in the background, so I'm adjusting the proportions slightly. Now, let's look at the roof. Finding the angle of the roof might be tricky, but I'll show you how to do it. In a properly proportioned house, the peak of the roof should be in the centre. We can find the centre by taking the side of the house, which in this case is a cube, and positioning it properly in perspective. So, here's what we're going to do. We'll mark the lines and define the structure more clearly. Now let's find the centre of this side of our cube. We'll draw two diagonals from corner to corner, and where they intersect, that's the centre of our cube. From there, we'll draw a perpendicular line, and this will give us the roof of the house. Now we know where all the lines should go. We can also determine the height of the roof, which goes above the house like this. I'll clean up the extra lines and you'll see that nothing bad happened. Everything's fine. Let's do it again. We found the centre and... Oops! I moved it in the wrong place. Sorry about that. I just realised I wasn't looking in the right spot. Now, let's make sure the roof lines are clear. Once that's done, we can already erase the construction lines and focus on the rest. Now we have windows, a veranda and the columns to take care of. I could find the centre of the columns by using cross lines and such, but honestly, I'm feeling a bit lazy with that. It's not such a big difference, so I'll just mark the columns roughly. One column is closer, the other two are a bit more spaced out. Remember, the windows will also converge at the vanishing point. Let's find the window's location. I'll move just a little bit down from the roof, and here's where the window goes. Windows and doors are usually at the same height, so we can easily mark the top line for the door and the window. Once we have that, we can find the bottom of the window as well. This one is pretty much horizontal. Also, all the lines inside the window, like the frame and shutters, will follow the same perspective as the lines we already drew. Everything converges toward that same vanishing point. It's interesting to note that we can draw the wooden planks here, directly with the pencil, and leave them visible. We won't erase them. They'll show through once we start painting. We also have this wall here. If there was no roof, the wall would continue in this direction. So, the planks will follow the same angle as the wall, and their perspective will align with the perspective of the roof. I'll draw a few planks here to show the direction. Don't worry about the angle. It looks sharp, but that's how it should be. You'll see that later. It'll all come together perfectly. Here, I'll draw the thickness of the roof and the window details as well. And here too, more planks. You can add tiny lines to make them even, just to guide your drawing. These lines will also follow the perspective. and everything will look cohesive. Alright, now let's move on and start adding some details. I've already marked where the fence will go and how the columns will be positioned, and I guess I can add the little staircase, though I might do that a bit later. I'll just sketch it out for now, or at least mark where the posts will be. Honestly, you can barely see the posts beyond this point, so I'm keeping it pretty simple. There's sand, and maybe some grass, so the details will be kind of blurry there. For the staircase, I'll just roughly indicate where it should go and mark out the 3 steps for now. I can refine it later. Okay, now let's add the line for the waterline. There's a boat lying here, so I'll mark the waves with some simple lines. I'll leave some white space around these lines, so the thickness of the waves will show up nicely. If you want, you can draw everything with pencil first, but I'll just keep this in mind for later. Here's a little hill with a fence and some interesting posts in the foreground. There are some buoys hanging from these posts, and in the background I can see oars leaning against the house. There's also something colourful hanging, maybe some flags or decorations. So the sketch is pretty much done. For the clouds, I'm going to do them freehand with paint as I go along. If you're not sure about anything, or you get stuck, don't hesitate to send me your drawing. We can figure out the perspective together. You only need to practice it once or twice, and after that it'll be second nature. Now, let's move on to colour. I'm starting with the sky, then the water, the grass, and then the house. I'm doing the grass last because it surrounds the house, and I don't want to paint over it. Thanks so much for watching my videos. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. If you want more lessons, you can find them on my Patreon page. And I'd be super grateful for any donations. All the ways to support are listed in the video description. Let's continue with the lesson. As you can see, I haven't drawn the clouds in the sky yet, but I'll be adding them with paint as I go. The reference image has pretty muted clouds, so I'll add a bit of brown to tone down the blue and make it softer. Use the biggest brush you've got to paint this sky. The clouds will be smaller and lighter as they go toward the horizon. You can soften the border of the clouds by gently brushing over it with a damp brush, so it's not so harsh. It's probably best to do this while it's still wet, or you can do it from the start, like I did earlier. Looking at the top part of the sky, I realised I could have made the clouds a bit more blended. I guess I was a bit overconfident with the colour, haha. But that's okay. You can add a little more grey to the clouds if you want, or just soften the edges for a more natural look. I decided to soften the whole sky a little bit. It looked too bright before. Sometimes you just have to step back and tweak things as you go. Okay, now the sea. It's going to be about the same colour as the sky. Closer to the horizon, it'll look a bit darker. And closer to us, we'll start to see a touch of emerald or a blue-green shade. Right here, where I had drawn the waves earlier, I'm leaving some white spaces. On the shore, there's a wave coming in, and it looks kind of grey-blue because it's washing over the sand. There's also a shadow underneath the wave. Adding those soft shadows helps give it some volume and depth. The shoreline here looks a bit rough and uneven, and that's totally fine. Now let's move on to the grassy areas. And don't worry, grass doesn't always have to be green. You can skip green entirely if you want. Use a mix of brown, ochre, maybe some orange. I like starting with a base layer, just a soft, uneven cloud of colours that hint at grass. Then, once it starts drying, you can go back in and add blades and details. You can even throw in some blue if you feel like it. Just follow what feels right. It's your landscape. This area right here is a little lighter than the front, so I'll make the colour more delicate here. You can also paint those characteristic streaky marks, where it looks like a stick with fluffy bits coming off it. That kind of texture really suggests wild grass. Alright, we've got the grass, we'll come back and add some sandy texture later. But let's move on to the house now. I'm going to start with the roof. I love doing this wet-on-wet effect, especially for rooftops. It gives that slightly irregular natural look. So we flood the roof with colour, and while it's still wet we can drop in another colour, maybe a blue or something reflecting the sky. Uneven washes like that just look more interesting to me. The house itself, you can add a bit of greenery here, like I see on the reference photo. A few greenish or even bluish patches can add charm. For the main walls of the house, I'm mixing ochre with some yellow. I want that nice warm tone. The wall here is going to be a deeper yellow, more saturated. And then I might add a few spots here and there, because let's face it, no house is perfectly clean. It makes it look more lived in. Now, let's add a shadow under the roof. I'm doing it wet on wet right away. This side is in the light, so it's brighter. But here, under the roof, it'll be more greyish. The light doesn't hit it as much. We've got a nice soft grey under the roof line, and you can even go stronger with it toward the bottom. Right here, near the top of the wall, there's a bit of reflected light from the roof, so that area will be slightly lighter again.
Vamos a ver todo lo que hay. Disimular, así el problema y la duda no nos ven pasar. El que se enoja, mi amor, pierde un turno y se baja en esta estación. Tenemos saldo deudor con el mundo ahí afuera. Hagamos algo mejor, queda claro. Estamos todos acá yo me la banco, porque sé que estoy con vos. Vamos a ver todo lo que hay. No te asustes, mi amor.
Next up, let's pick a nice blue-green shade for the window shutters. Start by blocking in the shape with a single tone. Of course, you can always change up the colours, the house, the shutters. It's up to you. That's the fun part. At the end of the day, it's all about personal choice. Personally, I think a white house with blue shutters would look beautiful. Something more Italian or even Greek style, right? That could be really interesting. But for now, let's stick with what we have. We'll use a blue colour for the window glass, and I can add some shading to the shutters and the frames. You can do this with little strokes. If you prefer a cleaner, more precise look, you can use a fine brush to add those details. I'm all about working a bit faster, though. I don't see anything wrong if things are just a little bit off. It's all part of the charm. I'll add some shadows here on the posts. And don't forget about the floor. It's green too, so I'll work on that. Make sure to fill in between the posts where the floor should be dark. There are these cylindrical columns under the house that also need some shading. I'll add some blue shadows there. Now what's left? The beach and the posts. I'm going to add some shadows around the posts, with a touch of blue. The buoys are also cylindrical, so we'll show the light and shadow on them. The seaside will be a little lighter, where the light hits. Oh, and the boat! Almost forgot about that. Let's add some colour to it. I'll use a little red and maybe some grey for the outline. Also, don't forget to add shadows under the boat and between the benches. For the outlines, I'll keep it simple. I'm not going for fine lines with a pen or anything. I don't want to make it too graphic. But if you prefer a more precise finish, you can always use a fine liner. I have one that's 0.5, but I think it's a bit too thick for this, so I'm just going to use a regular hard pencil and emphasize the areas I want to stand out. I'll outline the posts and maybe some of the planks. There are some uneven areas on the beach, so I'll go in with colour to define those as well.
Vamos a ver todo lo que hay. No te apures, mi amor. Despacito este bardo es mucho mejor. Es mucho mejor.
So here's the finished result. A more greenish house with greyish shutters. The shutters made a big difference in the final look, right? But otherwise, the colours are pretty much the same. Only the shutters are now a bit greyer. There's really nothing complicated here. Once you've got the hang of the perspective, everything else just comes together so smoothly and easily. So go ahead, try it out, and send me your work. I'll see you in the next class. Bye for now.